There are some stories that feel like they could only exist in fiction, but are absolutely real. A story about two young girls, an all-consuming friendship, and a murder that sent shivers around the world. What makes it even more surreal is this: that very crime accidentally became the spark behind one of the greatest films in cinematic history, The Lord of the Rings. Today, we're going to open a door to the past, where guilt, imagination, and fate. It was a quiet afternoon in Christchurch, New Zealand. The trees in Victoria Park swayed gently under a pale sky. The gravel path was calm, then screams terrified, sharp, and then silence. A woman lay motionless on the forest floor, her head bleeding onto the mossy grass. Standing over her were two teenage girls, school uniforms wrinkled, hands trembling. One of them was still holding a dark sock. Inside it was a half-brick. They didn't run, they didn't cry. They walked to the nearby room, calmly telling a waitress, "Please, there's been an accident, my mother fell." But when police arrived at the scene, they knew immediately this was no accident. The woman had been bludgeoned, repeatedly, at least 20 times. Her skull fractured, blood pooled unnaturally beneath her body. The force of the blows was terrifying. This wasn't panic, this was planned, and the killers, just 15 and 16 years old. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't self-defense. It was something else entirely, something darker. As the detectives pieced together the timeline, they began to realize this wasn't a crime of impulse. This was premeditated, cold, and chillingly well executed for two teenage girls. But what would drive children, seemingly ordinary schoolgirls, to commit such a brutal murder? That's where this story begins. Because behind the blood on the grass was a friendship so intense, so obsessive, it blurred the line between fantasy and reality and ended in murder. And the twist: one of those girls would go on to become a world-famous crime novelist. But at that moment, all she was a killer. Her name was Juliet Hulme, 15 years old. Pale, sharp-minded, raised in privilege but burdened by illness. Born in England, she was shipped off to New Zealand to recover from tuberculosis, far away from the polite salons and proper expectations of her upper-class family. There she met Pauline Parker, 16, working class, fiercely intelligent but closed off, brooding, a storm behind quiet eyes. They met at Christchurch Girls' High School, and it was electric: two outcasts, two dreamers. They didn't just become friends, they created an entire world together. They called it the Fourth World, a fantasy realm where they were goddesses, lovers, rulers, writers. They wrote stories, acted out plays, invented kingdoms, and filled notebook after notebook with their imagined adventures. But as the real world loomed with its responsibilities, rules, and most of all, separation, their fantasy grew more sacred, more necessary. Juliet's family had plans: a divorce, a move to South Africa. And in Juliet's mind, that meant exile again. Worse than death, it meant losing Pauline, the only person who saw her, who understood her. And for Pauline, it was the same. She'd found the one person who made her feel like she mattered. Not just someone's daughter, not just a shadow. Juliet was her world. So when they were told they couldn't stay together, something inside both girls cracked. That person was Pauline's mother, Honora Reaper. A strong, practical woman, no nonsense. She didn't understand the intensity between her daughter and Juliet. Maybe she didn't want to. All she saw was how her daughter had changed. How distant she'd become. How completely she clung to this strange girl with British manners and wild ideas. So when Juliet's parents announced they were moving to South Africa and offered to take Pauline with them, there was one condition. Pauline's mother had to agree. Pauline asked. She begged, she pleaded. Her mother looked her in the eye and said, "Absolutely not." And just like that, the fantasy world shattered. To Pauline, it was betrayal. To Juliet, it was exile again. But instead of accepting heartbreak, they began to imagine something else. A solution, a perfect crime. What if Pauline's mother died suddenly? An illness, an accident, anything to remove the obstacle. It started as a whisper. A what if? Then a plan, then logistics. A date, a time, a weapon. It wasn't a crime of rage. It was a murder built on notebooks and fantasy. Because when you're 15 and 16 and the only thing that matters is never being apart, everything else, even murder, starts to feel like a story you're just writing together. Only this time it wouldn't end on paper. It would end in blood. The plan was disturbingly simple. Juliet found an old house brick in her garage. She wrapped it carefully in one of her stockings. Tight, heavy, silent. A perfect weapon for a storybook murder. They rehearsed the scene like a play. They would take Honora, Pauline's mother, on a casual walk through Victoria Park. Juliet would accidentally drop a small stone or trinket. When Honora bent down to pick it up, Pauline would strike. One hit, maybe two. It would look like an accident, a fall, a bump to the head. No one would suspect two girls. Who would? Juliet handed Pauline the sock. She smiled. A tight, knowing smile, not cruel, not excited, just calm, as if handing over a prop on opening night. And Pauline, she took it with both hands, no hesitation. It didn't feel like murder to them. It felt like destiny. Like the final act of a story only they understood. They packed sandwiches, laughed. They walked with Honora to the park just like any ordinary day, trees rustling, birds overhead. The path ahead soft with fallen leaves, everything quiet. No one noticed the stocking in Pauline's coat. No one saw the tension in her grip. No one imagined what was coming. They were just two girls, smiling, planning a perfect day, a perfect ending. But as they stepped into the shaded grove of Victoria Park, the world they built in fiction was about to come crashing into reality one blow at a time. Juliet dropped the trinket, a shiny pink stone. It rolled gently onto the dirt path. "Oops," she said softly. Honora, unsuspecting, bent down to pick it up, just like they planned, and in that moment, Pauline struck. The first hit landed hard, a sickening thud of brick against skull. Honora let out a sharp scream. The girls panicked. Juliet grabbed her arms, held her down. Pauline hit again and again and again. The stocking swung wildly. Blood sprayed the path. 20 times, that's what the coroner would later count. 20 crushing blows. The final ones left her face nearly unrecognizable. It all lasted less than a minute, just 45 seconds, but that's all it took to erase a life. When it was over, Pauline stared down at her mother's body, eyes open, chest still. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she whispered, "It's done." Then, like nothing had happened, they washed their hands in a nearby stream, fixed their hair, walked calmly to a tearoom at the edge of the park. "Help," they told the woman behind the counter. "There's been an..." At the police station, the girls were separated. 2 interrogation rooms, 2 childhoods unraveling, but the silence didn't last long. Pauline broke first. She told them everything. The planning, the stalking, the picnic, the stone. The 20 blows. She didn't cry, she didn't tremble, she simply told the truth. Juliet followed, calmly confirming the story like she was reciting a scene from a novel, detached, composed, as if it had all been inevitable. The press went into a frenzy. Schoolgirls in savage killing. A murder pact between teenage friends. New Zealand had never seen anything like it, and then came the photos. The mugshots. Pauline, eyes blank, mouth set in a flat line. Juliet, pale, almost ethereal, with the faintest hint of a smile. 2 faces the public couldn't comprehend, not monsters, not maniacs, just children, but the details were too brutal to ignore. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a mistake. It was premeditated murder carried out with intent and almost no remorse. In court, their diaries were read aloud. Pages filled with fantasy, coded languages, and a shared obsession with the fourth world. The entries revealed a slow descent into delusion, a belief that normal rules didn't apply to them, that love, their kind of love, justified anything, even death. The judge ruled they were guilty of murder, sentenced to prison indefinitely. And in a final twist of punishment, they were never allowed to see or speak to each other again. The world they'd built together was gone, not with a bang but a locked door, a cold cell, and silence. Juliet served 5 years. When she was released, she was 20. Still young, still brilliant, but now marked. She disappeared, no interviews, no apologies, no headlines. She changed her name, moved continents, became someone new. Anne Perry. A quiet woman with a sharp British accent and a love for books. She worked odd jobs, kept to herself, and eventually she started writing crime novels, stories about betrayal, about obsession, about murder. Fiction, but with fingerprints. At first, no one noticed. She was just another writer in a crowded market, but the stories were good, too good, realistic. Gripping, dark, but human, publishers paid attention, so did readers. Anne Perry's books began climbing bestseller lists. Mysteries set in Victorian London, smart detectives, flawed criminals, twisted motives. She published one, then another, then another. Within 2 decades, she was one of the most prolific crime writers in the world. Over 100 novels, translated into dozens of languages. 26 million copies sold. She gave interviews, went on book tour. Talked about writing murder, but never about committing one. No one suspected a thing. To the And then someone remembered it too. Peter Jackson, a young New Zealand filmmaker known mostly for campy horror and puppet comedies, stumbled across the case while researching true crime stories from his homeland. He couldn't shake it. Two teenage girls, a murder, a fantasy world. It wasn't just shocking, it was tragic, intimate, almost poetic. So in 1994, he brought it to the screen, Heavenly Creatures. A film that reimagined the twisted bond between Juliet and Pauline, from their imagination to their crime. Starring a then-unknown Kate Winslet as Juliet. Beautiful, eerie, brilliant. The movie premiered to critical acclaim. It was haunting, lyrical, deeply human. Jackson and co-writer Fran Walsh earned an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Suddenly, the world saw Peter Jackson differently. He wasn't just the zombie guy. He was a serious storyteller, one who could take you deep inside the minds of monsters and make you feel something for them. Heavenly Creatures became his stepping stone. It was the film that got studios to listen, to trust. And not long after, Jackson was handed the reins to one of the biggest franchises in cinematic history, The Lord of the Rings. Yes, the road to Middle-earth passed through a real murder in a New Zealand park. And the ghost of Juliet Hulme, now Anne Perry, quietly walked with it. But Jackson wasn't the only one whose world changed that year. Because Heavenly Creatures didn't just relaunch a career, it reopened a case. And Anne Perry's secret wasn't a secret anymore. As the film gained attention, journalists began digging. Old newspaper clippings, court archives, mugshots from 1954, two teenage girls, one of them looked eerily familiar. A London reporter traced Juliet Hulme's trail, through boarding schools, through border entries, and finally to a quiet home in Scotland where best-selling crime novelist Anne Perry was living, writing, smiling for fans. And that's when the bomb dropped. Anne Perry was Juliet Hulme, the teenage killer, the girl with the brick in the stocking. The headlines exploded. Famous novelist was teenage murderer. Author of Death lived it first. Her readers were stunned. Bookstores pulled her novels. TV anchors dissected her past. The public betrayed, and Anne, she didn't run, she gave a statement. She said, "I was a child, I paid my debt, I remember very little." No tears, no denial, no apology. She simply returned to writing. Her next book hit the shelves right on schedule, because here's the twist. It didn't destroy her, the scandal passed, the headlines faded, the book sales still strong. She continued publishing for decades. Quiet. Unbothered, a woman who had once killed for love, now selling stories of fictional killers to the masses. Was she rehabilitated, or just rebranded? That question. And yet it didn't ruin her. Anne Perry kept writing, kept touring, kept selling books by the millions. Her fans split in two, those who were horrified and those who said she paid her debt, let her be. She became a strange symbol of both accountability and society's willingness to forget. But can redemption really be earned in silence? Can you write about justice while refusing to speak of your own crime? Anne Perry never returned to New Zealand. She never contacted Pauline Parker. She never publicly revisited that blood-stained day in Victoria Park. In interviews, when asked, she offered short, cold replies. It was a terrible time. Well, as I've moved on, and maybe she had, but what about Honora Reaper, the mother left bleeding on the grass? What about a daughter who beat her own mother to death, then lived a life of imagination and applause? What about all the readers who unknowingly idolized a killer? In 2023, Anne Perry died quietly at the age of 84. Her obituary mentioned her books, her awards, her global success. But for many, she'll always be remembered for something else. The girl who killed to protect a fantasy and then spent a lifetime writing new ones. Was she rehabilitated or just well hidden? Was she a story of redemption or just a master of rebranding? That's not for us to decide. But if there's one thing this story reminds us, it's that even the darkest truths can live behind the calmest smiles. And sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones who learn to blend in. If someone you admired turned out to have a dark past, would you forgive them? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where